being said, I've got a couple questions. The problem is that I see in dealing with my constituents, and I appreciate what everyone has said, it is hard to explain to a constituent how it's endangered when you can adopt it as a pet. People just don't get that. I've got people that have adopted them. They have baby tortoises in the backyard, and then you've got a whole family of tortoises back there. And it's hard to understand. Recollection serves me in my briefing, this is the only endangered species that can be adopted. And I don't understand how it was ever thought to be endangered if you can go get a couple and put them in your backyard when you can't return them to their native habitat, so to speak. Now, I don't know how that program got started, but it clearly, to me, sends a mixed message of what we're doing here. I did have a chance last week, and I want to thank staff for joining me, of touring the, whatever it's called, Tortoise Hilton, the desert tortoise habitat out there south of Southern Highlands. It's way out there. It's way out there. It's down a long, dirt, bumpy road. I had thought, and in my ignorance, I guess, to this, I thought that's where you took tortoises that were on land that was going to be developed. And come to find out, that's not what it is. That's the place you drop off pets that are in people's yards that they don't want anymore. That's what the function of the tortoise habitat, if that's what you call it, is. It's well maintained. There's a little infirmary there for the sick tortoises and isolation areas, but going to what Commissioner Weekly said, we don't have this for our children, the medical care that's provided for tortoises. And my question, I guess, are the conservation area, it seems like there's no quantifiable, you can't count them because they crawl on the ground in the burrows, and I don't know if we know how many there are, or it's a guess how many there are. And if you said we had to get to 300,000, then they're not endangered anymore, I certainly could understand. We discussed this about the pupfish, I think it's called, where there's 10 of them that you can say they're endangered, or the relic frog, or even the cutthroat trout that you said you breed and then you release them into the river. We're intentionally keeping the boy tortoises here and the girl tortoises here out at the habitat so they don't have babies, which kind of goes against nature and wanting more tortoises. And I'm just, it's a confusing message that we're sending out to people, and we're spending at the same time millions of dollars. And it would seem like there should be a number, that if you've got more than X, you're not endangered anymore. But when you go out and you see them crawling around, and it's a nice educational thing to do for the kids, and I appreciate that. Marcy took me to one at one of the schools, and the kids all like it, I think, more because they like Mojave bats than tortoises, quite frankly. I mean, it's very, very well done in terms of education. It just seems there's no end to this. I mean, I don't know how we are going to increase the habitat available and this linkage stuff and all this technical stuff you're talking about. We've got freeways running through here and breaking up the land, and how are we going to get the land back to make it for tortoises? How are we possibly going to do this?
Excellent questions. I've written a bunch down. Good. I think we are, again, in complete agreement on the whole captive tortoise thing. We don't like it. We don't think it should continue. You're right, the Tortoise Conservation Center was originally meant to take tortoises out of harm's way for development. It's become a repository for unwanted pets. We can't afford it. That's why it's closing down the end of next year. Unless we can change the focus back to a recovery program, which is a real struggle right now. And even then, we have the funding to continue to maintaining it at a lower level. So that's where that ends. And again, I think we're in agreement on that. Those are a couple of the pet issues. Counting how many, I didn't write down the last point you just made.
Increasing the habitat, and the linkage is being broken up.
Thank you. It gets right back to Commissioner Chris, okay. Commissioner June Kiliani.
Whoa, he did his homework.
Once again, Marcy Henson, ladies and gentlemen. So, she trained me well. And by the way, let me pause and say, with all seriousness, I've been here a little over 2 years, and your staff here at the county has been superb at informing me as a new Nevada State supervisor and working with us to administer this permit in a way that works for all. And again, I think your staff agrees, all the same points you made, Mr. Chairman, on the pet tortoise issue. So back to Commissioner Giuliani's point, I do think there are simple things that we have done in some places we can do more of to reduce fragmentation. Where we got the 185 miles of fencing we've already put in, make sure there's enough connectivity, access points under roadways so that all those little white dots start connecting up again. So that's an excellent point as well. Counting how many, it's hard to get the absolute number. That's why we have 16 trend lines, because we do think we can measure trends, and we've gone through a rigorous process. If we count tortoises year after year in a rigorous, statistically valid manner, that involves outside review, that we can measure trends, but ultimately counting tortoises is, well, it's impossible, but it's far too expensive, let's put it that way. And I think that's...
If I could ask a question about your linkages, your connectivity here. If you connect them and you build a route for the tortoise to crawl, how do you know they're going to crawl that way? They might just want to go and dig their own little burrow, and I mean, I think they've got their own lives to lead, and we're kind of like forcing them into what suits Fish and Wildlife. I'm not making a joke out of it, into what suits Fish and Wildlife's analysis of how we get there. I mean, they seem really happy crawling out in the desert and on their own. And it seems like we just left them alone and we had enough, which there's plenty of bushes out there for them to eat, we're better off. That's just my...
Well, and again, it's the county's program, and so we're happy to entertain any or all of those thoughts. But for building the highway in the first place, I think leaving alone is the best strategy. But we want highways and we need highways. And so if it requires fencing, providing access points, then maybe that, even if that's affordable, depending on what we all mean by affordable, $69 a home or not, then we can also achieve, and we have achieved those outcomes. I think, in fact, I think we've recently found that we've been achieving a higher level of success here in Clark County with those outcomes.
Commissioner Stout, then Commissioner Giuliani.
Thank you. You actually answered one question I had. We were contacting some of the other entities that were involved to work together. Yesterday, I appreciated the briefing, and I really feel like this is a good conversation to have because I think there's a point of reasonableness in the middle of all this so that we're not tilted one way or the other, so that we are protecting tortoises for future generations, but at the same time, we're not hampering development or creating undue problems for people that want to develop in the desert. So I appreciate the conversation because I think we can reach a point of reasonableness.
And if I just may respond again, I really appreciate it too. Thank you, Commissioner Scow. And again, that's why when we do these, when Congress amended the Endangered Species Act in 1982 to create the Section 10 permit process, they referred to it as a creative partnership between the federal government and non-federal entities such as you. And again, a county commission turns over, new people come in, they rightfully ask the question, what are we doing and why, and how much is it costing? Those are very healthy questions, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Commissioner Giuliani.
I believe the adoption came about in state statute, correct? Not through the Federal Endangered Species Act. Do you know offhand?
Well, the Endangered Species Act, the Endangered Species Act was passed in 1973. Previous to 1982, there would have been no option to provide the pressure relief valve that the county benefited from in the early 90s when development was severely curtailed. 1982, there was an amendment, Section 10A1B, that allowed us to give non-federal entities a permit to take tortoises, to kill tortoises, to wipe out habitat. Previous to that, there was no opportunity under the federal act to do that.
Gotcha.
And Marcy could speak to this much better than I could, but you're right. There was state legislation as well that facilitated this partnership.
And I think that goes to Commissioner Sisolak. They literally brought the tortoises up with little diapers on them and had legislators adopt them and so forth. And I think that's the genesis of the adoption component was they preyed on foster kids as well. So at least they recognized that kids had some value. That said, I think the issue, really more importantly, with the Endangered Species Act is the ecosystem in it itself. So it's not really, you're right, they like to burrow, but they move. Animals move hundreds of miles sometimes. Now, these guys are a little bit slower, gals. But there is that. That is why the interconnectivity, and it might make better sense so we don't stop the construction along the highways by giving them an additional avenue to be able to move through.